Online learning, once an anomaly, now a standard piece of higher education. For many of us, there are some feelings and questions about the online learning environment. How can I make it as rigorous as a residential environment? How can I foster engagement, communication, and collaboration when I'm not in the same room as my students? How can I assess my students? How can I make sure they aren't cheating? All of these are very valid questions to consider as you set out to build an online learning experience, and especially as you consider how to best assess students in that environment. Before we identify the ways in which we can assess students, let's take a moment for the value of online learning. Many of today's students are different than traditional students. Many of them are balancing work and families. An online learning environment makes school possible for those who it might not have previously been an option for. This is something we should celebrate. Doors are being opened for those who did not previously think furthering their education was possible. As our educational environments expand to a new modality, one of the biggest questions is how to assess student learning in the online environment. As we begin to identify and design assessments, it is always helpful to keep in mind that there are two broad categories of assessments: formative assessments, summative assessments. Formative assessments can be thought of as assessment for learning. These are checkpoints along the way to make sure students are progressing in their learning as expected. They help both the student and the instructor identify gaps in understanding. Summative assessment can be thought of as assessment of learning. These are typically at the end of a unit, course, or program and allow the student to demonstrate their successful learning of the content covered. A good balance of these will help both you and the students be able to identify what they have learned and where they might need to spend some additional time. Additionally, when designing assessments, always start by reviewing the outcomes for your course. It is imperative that we ensure that all assessments measure the student's achievement of the identified student learning outcomes. And one final reminder, when creating your online learning environment, let's remember, just because something is different does not mean it is less than. Just as we require creativity and critical thinking from our students, so will that be required of us as we design assessments for an online environment. Keeping that in mind, let's jump into some ways in which we can assess our students.